out there in the Cotton Belt, we hope that you are enjoying some downtime in this off season, wherever you are out there between the Carolinas and California. I guess here on February 19th as we record, there are going to be some of you down there in far South Texas who are much closer to planting. You may be planting at this point, certainly much closer than the rest of us, but I do suspect the majority of y'all are enjoying some of the slow season. And deservedly so. Now, also, we are seeing some temperatures inching near 70 degrees here in Memphis. I guess maybe some of y'all are starting to worry about a little early weed germination happening out there too. So let's hope that stays to a minimum. But I have mentioned, to get us on track for this week's episode, I mentioned on last week's episode that we were on the road. We were traveling. It was a multi-stop work trip for me that I wound up in San Antonio, where on February 12th, I was in the room as the National Cotton Council conducted the business end of their annual meeting. And one highlight of that last day of their annual meeting is always when NCC Vice President of Economics and Ag Policy, Jody Campiche, steps up to the podium and she delivers, in this case, the World Economic Outlook for 2026. Now, just kind of set the scene for you. I was talking with Jody. I bumped into her in the kind of lobby area before that meeting at the hotel, and bumped into her before her speech. And I was kind of got to listen in as her colleagues were kind of jokingly consoling her on having to deliver, what everybody imagined would be a very bleak speech, given the economic conditions out there in the cotton market to this crowd. But Jody stepped up to the stage and she gave a very even-keeled assessment of what was happening in our market. And she also revealed the council's early season planting intentions survey results. They pegged cotton planted acreage at 8.99 million acres for 2026. Now, some of y'all may recall that just a month ago, I revealed our 2026 cotton grower acreage survey results, in which I had to run the numbers and I pegged plantings at 9,005,000 acres. That is a mere 15,000 acres off from what the NCC number that was released just last week. Now, many people are saying that this confirms that I am personally a titan of mathematics. They are saying that I'm up there with Pythagoras, with Isaac Newton, and who am I to tell them they're wrong? I was happy that our number was right on the dot of what the council's number is. But to be sure, that probably reflects just stagnant market conditions than anything else. But listen, aside from that, we are delighted today to have Jody Campiche on board with us to talk us through her economic update that she delivered, including how they arrived at that acreage estimate. But the first thing we got to do, we are very delighted to hear from our friends at Americot, proud supporters of the Cotton Companion podcast. Now, our custom editor, Hillary Wynn, recently got the chance to sit down with my old friend, Dr. Tom Brooks, Western Regional Breeding Manager at Americot, and also Dr. Mike Robinson, Eastern Regional Breeding Manager at Americot. And they talk about some of the exciting things happening with the Americot Next Gen portfolio, and we are happy to bring you that conversation right now.
Hi, I'm Hillary Wynn, Custom Content Manager at Meister Media Worldwide, publisher of Cotton Grower Magazine. Joining me today from Americot are Dr. Tom Brooks and Dr. Mike Robinson. They are going to discuss how finding the right next-gen cotton variety amid countless trait combinations takes years of precise breeding and testing to meet growers' needs. But first, a little about Tom and Mike. They are seasoned cotton breeders whose combined careers span more than 5 decades of innovation at Americot, each leading regional breeding efforts with deep expertise. Tom, the Western Regional Breeding Manager for Americot, brings a lifelong connection to agriculture and focuses on developing cotton varieties tailored to the demanding conditions of West Texas. Mike, the Eastern Regional Breeding Manager at Americot, draws on decades of hands-on breeding experience and early inspiration from USDA research into creating high-performing cotton varieties for the Eastern U.S. Tom and Mike, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Hillary. It's great to be here today.
Thanks, Hillary.
How does targeting a specific trait, such as disease resistance, add complexity to the breeding process and extend the timeline for developing a new next-gen cotton variety?
Hillary, breeding primarily focuses on yield and fiber for specific regions, your basic performance and how things fit into certain areas. When additional traits are added, it requires additional resources to identify, incorporate, evaluate those traits, and then also increase the breeding lines that contain the homozygous traits. The old saying is that it takes 10 years to develop a cotton variety, but adding additional traits late in the pipeline can add an additional 3 to 5 years in the evaluation process. For example, we have the jassed leafhopper that has been shown up last year in the Georgia and the Carolinas. Resistance to that pest does exist, but it's in a different species of cotton, and it will take many years to get that incorporated into our hirsutum lines that we grow in the U.S.
With today's vast combination of native traits and transgenic platforms, what makes identifying the right plant so rare, often compared to finding a needle in a haystack, and why does that matter for growers?
Hillary, when you consider the number of individual traits that make up today's stacked varieties, it could be as many as 6 or more in today's varieties that we add in. You may need to screen thousands of plants to find one that is going to breed true for all those traits. And every additional native trait that you add increases that number exponentially. So the haystack scenario is appropriate because the number is equivalent to trying to find that one plant, maybe in over an acre of plants in the field that has all the combination of traits that you want. And of course, that plant needs to perform both on yield and fiber like the growers currently planted varieties. So there's a lot to find there.
Why does creating each next-gen variety require such an immense amount of testing and refinement to ensure the final product delivers the optimal combination of traits in the field?
Hillary, when you consider all the different production areas across the cotton belt, each year brings its own little nuances in evaluating lines across these geographies. Farming practices, the grower inputs, environmental conditions, all of these changes occur each year. Some are subtle, some are not. We are consistently trying to advance lines that are adapted to these areas, as well as capturing the stability needed to be consistent with these changes that occur that we know are going to occur. And again, as we stated earlier, these lines have started years before in development process to get to this stage.
Where can our audience go for more information?
Hillary, our website is probably the best place to go, www.americot.com. And on that website, it's an easy click down to find descriptions of all of our varieties that we're selling, as well as contact information for our sales reps that would be local to where you are.
Tom and Mike, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Hillary.
Thanks, Hillary. Enjoyed it.
So, all right, a massive thank you then to Americot and their cotton breeding experts, Dr. Tom Brooks and Dr. Mike Robinson. Now, as we mentioned earlier in my opening, I had the privilege last week to be in the room when Dr. Jody Campiche delivered her 2026 World Economic Outlook that was there in San Antonio for the National Cotton Council's annual meeting. Now, while that presentation was a sober-eyed look at current economic conditions, being what they are, we did get a glimpse at a few, dare I would say, promising fundamental factors as we look down the line. They may be a ways out, but there were some glimmers of hope there. So we want to dive into that today. And luckily for me, I have the author of that report, Dr. Jody Campiche, with me. Jody, we are so glad to have you with us today. Welcome to the Cotton Companion.
And thanks for having me on here. And it was good to see you last week in San Antonio.
Yeah, it was a big cotton industry family affair last week. I got to catch up with a lot of old friends. I'm sure you did too. I talked a little bit at the beginning of this episode, Jody, about kind of the scene and the mood in San Antonio last week and how you really had an enviable task of delivering this economic update during some challenging times. So we know that. I wonder, do you find that it's an easier job when you get up there and tell folks that there's dollar cotton on the way? And just, along with that, tell me what your mindset is when you're delivering that update to our producers during a time like this.
So, of course, when prices are strong, like the possibility of $1 cotton, there's certainly more optimism in the room. During the tougher times, the responsibility just feels heavier as producers are dealing with tighter margins and difficult economic decisions. But either way, the responsibility for me is to provide a clear and honest analysis of the current economic environment. This year, I also focused more on cotton's enhanced farm policy safety net, and that's generally not needed in those times of higher prices.
Yeah, definitely. That was timely delivery of those farm policy safety net factors there. Now, let's get into the weeds a little bit, Jody, with the supply and demand stuff. Starting with the NCC's own planting intention survey, you had pegged plantings at basically 9 million acres, just shy of 9 million acres, very similar to what we projected a month ago when we projected 9 million and 5,000. So both of us are right on that 9 million acre number. Can you tell us about the process of y'all's survey? I mean, when were you conducting it and how is the survey carried out?
So we surveyed growers during the month of January, and we send out either by regular mail or email the survey to our grower list. And as you mentioned, overall the survey did show pretty much the same number that you found on your survey. And one thing I noticed, some of the state level numbers were a bit different, and one in particular is Georgia. So Georgia acreage was already very low last year, and this year's response shows it would be at the lowest level since I think 1993, which is really a bit surprising.
One thing I know because I do our survey, Jody, so I'm super familiar with it, is that we also have a little bit of space for stakeholders, especially to explain their response, tell us why they chose their number. I wonder, do you guys have a platform like that so producers can tell you why they said what they did? And if so, what was your takeaway, if any, for why these growers indicated that they're going to be reducing acreage in 2026?
So we do have a spot for them to add their comments if they choose to. And, some do, some don't. But this year, the ones who did, most of them mentioned low prices and high production costs. And, that's not surprising. So on the survey, we of course asked them what they planned last year of cotton and other crops, and then what they plan to plant this year for cotton and other crops. And in most areas, the growers mentioned a shift to corn or soybeans. And since the survey, soybean prices have continued to strengthen even more. So we may see a little bit more shift more towards soybeans than corn.
Yeah, I didn't. I took note of that, and that's a smart thing to do because it's zero sum between those crops, and so it's good to have that intel too about what if they're leaving cotton, what are they going into for the year. So kind of gets into dovetails nicely with my next question here, Jody. I mean, in your opinion, given current prices, current scenario versus other row crops, do you think that our growers are responding properly to what the market is telling them? I guess to phrase it another way, we're set to reduce acreage to the lowest level, cotton acreage to the lowest level in a decade. And that can seem like a bitter pill to swallow if you are the editor of Cotton Grower Magazine, but it also may be the right thing to do in this moment. I mean, what do you have an opinion on that?
I do. And, I think they are responding to what the market's telling them. So, relative returns, cotton versus the competing crops, are basically telling producers to be cautious this year with cotton. And if projected returns don't pencil out, then the acreage has to adjust. And that's pretty much just economic survival. And for the fourth year in a row, costs are projected to exceed market revenue for cotton and even for some of the other commodities too. We will have a farm safety net that provides higher support this year, but it's still not enough to cover all the losses. So reducing acreage to this level is pretty painful, but I think it's just one way to rebalance the market and potentially fix the low price environment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, tough pill, but that's also the way the. I'm not an economist, but what was it? The invisible hand is. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to work, from what I gather. So, what about globally? What about globally, Jody? Easy for me to say. You spent some time in San Antonio going over acreage trends in competitive countries to us, like Brazil and Australia, but you also had several slides on China and India. Are our competitors on the global stage also reducing acreage in 2026?
So with low prices, I think we'll see the decline in acreage in most of the cotton growing regions. So just as in the US, we're looking at these low cotton prices, other growers are doing the same thing. And if we look over the last few years, world cotton acreage has continued to decline, and right now the acreage would be about the lowest that we've seen in over 60 years. And, China is expected to reduce acreage this year, and their yields, while they were a record yield this year, are expected to be a little bit closer to average levels. But based on some of their recent policy discussions, China says that they may move toward a structural reduction in cotton acreage to align with market demand, and basically optimize their allocation of ag resources, which means that they may be a smaller importer in the future. Now, they're still going to produce cotton, and at these higher yields, they don't need as much acreage. But again, they used to be our largest market. I think Brazil will probably reduce acreage a bit due to these lower prices. They're always kind of the wild card because they have the ability to just really expand if they want to. And they have. In the last decade, they've grown their cotton production by about 13 million bales, which is about the size of the U.S. crop. And they have the ability to further expand if they want to. So again, I think they may be down a bit. Australia will likely be down due to water availability. So when Australia has water, they have cotton. They have had water for the last 4 or 5 years, but it's starting to get lower. So I think that theirs will be down. India, India's really their production has just been stable to slowing over time because they really aren't seeing yield increases. So again, with U.S. production being down and production in the other major cotton growing regions being down, this could provide some support for the balance sheet.
Yeah, yeah. Again, not an economist, but it seems like drawing down on the supply side should be helpful at some point down the road. So, on the demand side, I seem to recall that you're projecting global demand to tick upwards, even if ever so slightly, next year. Can you tell us a little bit about that, what I would call marginally bullish factor or development for next year?
Yeah, so world consumption is projected to increase by about 1% in 2026. And most of that is increases in countries like Bangladesh and Vietnam, who continue to expand their textile industries. China, of course, is a large consumer, but they've really remained relatively flat on cotton consumption in the last decade. They've mostly been increasing their man made fiber consumption. But when we look at slow economic growth and then all the trade uncertainty, we still have the strong competition from lower priced man-made fibers that all just really creates a challenge. So again, that's why we're kind of projecting pretty minimal growth. Now, the fight against man-made fibers continues, and NCC recently launched the Plant Not Plastic campaign, basically to highlight the harmful impacts of synthetic clothing and the microplastics that we inhale. There's that, and there's other initiatives out there. It's important to remember that even a slight improvement in demand can make a really big difference in how the supply demand balance sheet tightens up over the next marketing year. Just a little bit of demand growth matters more when supply is contracting and could allow for some price support next year.
Yeah, Jody, you mentioned how that little bitty marginal is just 1%, but that's a big deal. We actually heard Dr. Darren Hudson tell a group of farmers that he was talking about the impact of 1% uptick in demand, year over year. I heard him tell a group of growers that down in Florida in December, and I have used it at every opportunity in the past 3 months. So I was trying to show restraint and not use that same antidote from Dr. Darren Hudson here, but I did. I've injected it. Yes, 1% uptick. It's a bigger deal than you might think. Oh, 1% is nothing, but it could have a big impact on dollar figures for our growers. So I was checking after your speech last week to drive us back on course here. I was checking Cotton Growers' Twitter feed, and if there was one positive that our producers were latching onto on social media, it was that U.S. carryover stocks figure, which you had pegged as declining to, I think, 3.47 million bales. Now, that is another thing that should be noteworthy eventually in terms of encouraging some bulls in the market, right?
So it should be noteworthy since it's tightening, even if it's just a gradual tightening, since this could eventually give the bulls something to work with. So the higher world consumption that we talked about and lower production result in a larger decline in world ending stocks. So if we look at current projections for 2026, world ending stocks outside of China could be at the lowest level since 2016. So with this reduced stocks, this means that U.S. exports could be higher in 2026, which is how we get to that smaller U.S. carryover. So, I think if world consumption can overcome the headwinds from this sluggish global economy and these cheaper man-made fibers, the 2026 balance sheet could definitely be supported with prices.
Yeah. I've obviously been steering you towards the positive notes that you had in your speech last week. So let's say, to that end, let's say your goal was to cheer up our producers, if just for a moment, if that had been your goal last week on the stage. I mean, I know we've gone over a lot of them, but what indicators out there would you point them towards to say, hey, there is light at the end of this tunnel?
So I think, first of all, well, just remember that, we need to work toward increasing demand for U.S. cotton. And a few things can help with that. A few things that we've been working on at NCC. So, new trade agreements that could include U.S. fiber, yarn, or fabric purchase commitments, or the passage of the Buying American Cotton Act would definitely provide a boost for the U.S. cotton industry. And if we look at the current balance sheet with supplies adjusting and stocks are tightening, and so far demand isn't collapsing. So, this could result in a shift. But until that shift happens, NCC staff have worked extensively over the past year to increase the safety net for the cotton industry and ensure that cotton's interests are fully represented in Washington. U.S. growers will receive an additional farm policy support this year, and that's going to start with $117 per acre in Farmer Bridge assistance payments at the end of this month. Then in October, producers will receive much higher PLC payments with a higher seed cotton reference price. So, because of the timing of this, I wanted to point out something else as well, that growers need to take a close look at those area-wide insurance policies before the approaching sales closing dates. With higher premium subsidies and no PLC and ARC restrictions, these programs provide more affordable coverage and additional support for growers. There's also a higher marketing loan rate and other marketing loan enhancements that provide the most support in times of low prices. Will all be effective this year. So, although the economic outlook for U.S. growers isn't really that much different than last year, growers need to make sure they understand the additional benefits of the cotton farm safety net that will be in place this year that wasn't in place last year.
Yeah, it's a good timely reminder. I'm glad you're able to remind our guys as much, our audience, of that in this moment, Jody. So listen, we thank you so much for joining us today. And we know you've had a whirlwind travel month so far, just like me. And we're only halfway through it. I know I'm sure I'll see you down at Gin Show here at the end of this month, which is at least in town for you and I. But we thank you for all the work that you're putting in on behalf of our farmers and for keeping them informed. So come back and visit with us at any time, Jody.
All right. Thanks for having me.
So, all right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Cotton Companion podcast. Thanks again to Dr. Jody Campiche of the National Cotton Council for joining us. And thanks as well to this week's episode sponsor, Americot, with their Next Gen brand cottonseed. Now, as always, we want to thank you, dear listeners, for joining us and for your continued support. We hope that you've enjoyed this episode, and if you did like what you heard, please be sure to spread the word and tell your farming friends and neighbors about the Cotton Companion podcast. Here's where and how they can find us.
You can find the Cotton Companion in 3 easy ways. First, go to cottongrower.com/companion or simply click the podcast tab at the top of the homepage. Second, subscribe to our channel on iTunes or wherever you find your podcasts these days. And 3, sign up for our weekly e-newsletter, the Cotton Grower e-News, that's delivered to your email inbox every Tuesday morning. You can do that by going to cottongrower.com/subscribe. Also, be sure to follow Cotton Grower on social media. We are at Cotton Grower Mag on Twitter. And on Facebook, you'll find us by searching for Cotton Grower Magazine.
The Cotton Companion podcast is produced by Mr. Tyler Hatch and Miss Kim Henderson, our talented colleagues at the world headquarters for Meister Media Worldwide in lovely Willoughby, Ohio. I am Beck Barnes, and we will be back with you in a couple of weeks with the next episode of The Cotton Companion.
'Cause God made me a farmer. Yeah, he works and he works and he works and he works all day.